Hi folks, Rob Flux here from Property Developer Network, here with another session called Ask Rob Anything. This is a feature that we offer for our annual members where they can actually come and ask me anything at all, and I will try to do whatever I can to respond to their question whilst giving them very specific, clear advice and also giving some general advice that's actually going to hopefully help the community. So today we've got Arun. Arun's got a little bit of a challenge, mate. What's your problem and how can we help?
Rob, I've got investment property and the tenant is it's being managed by a property manager who is not very experienced. So he called me to say that the tenant is experiencing some problems. I asked him to provide me some proof. So he has sent me a proof where both husband and wife have applied for a JobKeeper. So he has sent me the application and also statement from the accountant that they are experiencing a 30% drop in revenues. So that's all he has done. So I need to get back to him as to how do we proceed. How do we figure out its truth behind it as to whether what documents can I legally ask for? Yeah.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll just frame this in a way that's going to be a little bit generic so that everyone can help, and then I'll try and address your specific problems. So
sure.
There are different issues and challenges in each state. So each state has got different legislation about how and what you can do with in and around the eviction time process, and also what you can do in and around your rent reduction. So we need to be very state specific in some of this sidelines. I guess you've got two problems. So one, how do you deal with that tenant? And the other one too is how do you protect your income stream? And what we need to do firstly is have a look at how we protect your income stream up front. That then gives us insights into how we actually manage the tenant. Now, in your instance, I believe you have some landlord insurance that also has income protection. Is that correct?
Correct. It's protection against default of rent. Yeah.
Okay. So in that particular instance, the legislation that not the legislation, the PDS that sits around that insurance provider, typically, and you have to read your PDS for your insurance, but typically it says that you are not allowed to renegotiate the lease. Otherwise, you effectively wipe out your income protection side of things. So my guidance to you is to go talk to your insurance provider up front, ask them what specifically they need and what specifically you are covered for under these particular circumstances. And they will tell you the specific documents and evidence that they require if they're going to actually honour that claim, and whether or not they will allow a rent reduction and pay the difference. If you negotiate without talking to your insurance provider, then the insurance provider can effectively wash their hands of it and say, well, you did that of your own reconnaissance. We've had nothing to do with that process. So step number one, talk to your insurance provider. They will tell you the specific documents in order to do that. Now, you're quite lucky because you've got that income protection insurance sitting there. Unfortunately, not everyone out there is so lucky. And so for those people, the guidance would be a little bit differently. So they may have landlords insurance, but it may not have income protection. So in those instances, there's nothing to protect from the income stream point of view. So they could and should renegotiate the rental as quickly and as early as possible to ensure that that person can actually stay in place. The important thing here is to recognize that right now you physically cannot evict someone because the legislation has said that there's a moratorium on eviction. So depending upon the level of hardship, you need to make some really hard decisions as to how much of a discount you may offer them, assuming your insurance provider allows that, obviously, because you still need to pay your mortgage, okay? Because this has a knock-on effect to you. So if they don't pay you rent, then you're going to struggle to pay your mortgage. So once you've solved what you do with your insurance, that then takes you down to what do I do with the tenant? That then takes you back to what do I do with my bank? And so we kind of have to complete the loop for everyone, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But it all starts with the insurance provider up front. Now, they will almost guaranteed ask for some very specific documentation for the tenant to provide. Now, each insurance provider will ask for different documents, so I can't tell you what they will ask for, but it may be, for example, that they ask for proof of pay slips both before and after COVID, for example.
Right.
It may be that they ask for a bank statement showing that their income stream has been reduced. There's a number of things that they could ask for. It's important that you don't ask for that unsolicited, that you actually get guidance from your insurance provider before you actually seek that. That's going to protect your income stream, which will then mean that you can keep paying your mortgage. If, for example, you have no choice but to reduce the rent in this particular instance, and if your insurance provider doesn't cover you, then the next problem that you're going to have is, what do I do with my bank with regards to, do I defer my insurance payment? Not my insurance payments, my mortgage payments. Do I defer those? So again, you're allowed to, but my guidance would be, even if the bank allows it, I would be paying as much as humanly possible off of that loan at this point in time, because anything that you defer effectively just pushes your loan out further, and you'll incur interest on interest. So they're not going to penalize you for it at the moment. There's a lot of conjecture that that the banks are building up a little bit of a black book of people who have gone into hardship, and later on they'll potentially use that against you. I don't believe that they actually will. I think that's just more people talking about that in the media. But you always want to be mindful that, if we can pay our mortgage on time, we should. And if we can't pay it 100%, that we've at least been upfront with our bank and sought that exemption, and then paid as much as we can physically pay, and keep as up to date as humanly possible.
Rob, while we were talking, I looked at my insurance policy, and looks like it possibly doesn't cover, because it covers against denial of access, prevention of access, during repairs, tenant default, broken lease, living without notice. But it doesn't provide protection against tenant hardship.
Tenant default is what you're really going to be claiming on, right? Okay. So it's whether or not they actually default. So right now, from our previous chat, my understanding is that right now they're still up to date with their rent, so they haven't triggered the default yet.
Correct.
Right. So it's almost like it's coming, but it's not there yet. So you have to kind of wait for that default to actually occur. Yes. Then you use the default to make your claim. Right.
Now, it's insured only for 6 weeks in this situation, but the moratorium on eviction can go on for 6 months, right? So I wouldn't be protected any more than 6 weeks. So how do we, what do we do for the rest of the period?
Unfortunately, you're in the boat where almost everybody else in Australia is, who don't have income protection insurance. So once your 6 weeks has run out, then you don't have any choice at all with your tenant. Now, the tenant is still accumulating debt. Okay. Yeah. So technically, the tenant still owes you money. Whether or not the tenant has the ability to pay that in the future or not, I don't know. To be honest, it's a really tricky situation that my understanding from the stats that I've seen is more than 20% of the rental community is claiming this sort of hardship, which is then flowed on to more than 20% of mortgages where people have actually asked for deferrals off their mortgage. And so you're not in an unusual situation here, Arun, but it's unfortunately stacked against property owners. The protection mechanisms that the government have put in place are really trying to protect the tenant and make sure that they're not evicted and put on the street. And so we physically can't evict them. We don't have a choice in that matter. And if we wanted to evict them, it would have to be for a reason other than for the rental default. So, you know, have they not looked after the property? Have you previously issued breach notices for, you know, other issues or challenges in the property? You know, have they damaged it, or have they, you know, noise complaints from neighbours, or all sorts of things like that, okay? So you have to be really careful that it's not in any way, shape or form associated with their hardship side of things.
Sure.
The second part is really, well, not knowing the relationship that you have with those tenants, how long they've been there, are they good tenants? Do you know that they are going to be good tenants long term? You want to try and work with them as much as you can within their physical capacity to actually make a payment. Because on the other side of this, once they get their job back, once we're all back to relative normality, you want to provide them the ability to not only keep being your tenant, but also catch up with the arrears. And the likelihood of you chasing arrears when somebody is no longer your tenant becomes really, really tricky. But whilst they are your tenant, assuming that they were always a good tenant, you may be able to claw that back over the next 18 months or 2 years, etc. So I'd be taking a good hard look at, were they a good tenant in the first place, and speak to your property manager as to whether or not that's the case. Would you want them for another 2 or 3 years to allow you the ability to claim that money back? Because legally it's owed to you, but it's whether or not the amount owed is worth the cost of pursuing it if they end up abandoning and running away, for example. And I'm going to hypothesize to say that the cost of chasing it is probably going to be more expensive than the amount of default you've got. So as property owners, we're in a really tricky spot. The government's kind of making us the scapegoat. You know, the bank is not losing any money on their side. The tenant is not being evicted, and the property owner is the one who's unfortunately paying the brunt of that, amortized over many years, but effectively we're the ones that are going to pick up the tab. So I understand that doesn't really help a huge amount, other than give you some you know, next steps, mate. I think that the next steps are really going to be very subjective based on your conversation with your insurance provider. They will tell you what you can do with regards to the documents. They will also give you some insights into what you can do after your 6 weeks actually expires. I would make sure that you then have a very good long chat with your property manager. Make sure that they understand that whatever steps you take need to be in compliance with your insurance provider, because if they don't do that step by step appropriate to match your insurance provider, then you miss out on an income. If you miss out on income, they miss out on a property management fee. So, you know, it's in their best interest to actually follow the process. And I say that because of the fact that you mentioned that they were a relatively new property manager and a little bit naive in the process. You mentioned that in our previous chat. So, you know, just make sure that you're managing them as much as anything else.
Oh yeah, I escalated it to the office manager. So, yeah, I'm taking care of that. So I think I've got a fair good idea as to my questions as to how to verify the truthfulness of the request, in the sense that just work with the insurance, whatever their requirements, follow them. And so that will cover me for 6 weeks. And after that, to minimize, just to try to keep the tenant as much as possible.
Very good. Well, glad to have been of help, Arun. And if anyone else out there is an annual member, then feel free to click on the links below to ask Rob anything, and I'll do what I can to both help you and educate our community at the same time. Until next time, thanks folks, bye for now.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much, Rob.